On today's show, should the Houston Rockets extend Jalen Green this offseason? Would you be comfortable with a 5-year, $160 million contract for Jalen Green after his late surge this past season? Plus, we'll get into key Rockets offseason dates to pay attention to, as well as why the Rockets made the right call in picking Fred VanVleet over James Harden one more time with gusto after James Harden's latest playoff performances, plus some additional NBA postseason thoughts. We're going to get to all of that and so much more on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
To extend or not to extend? What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. That's the best way you can help the show out, is to comment your thoughts below. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review helps us out a ton. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Look, I've got a bit of a competitive side, and it's a huge fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play Store. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day. Thank you for being an everydayer, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making the show part of your day every single day. A lot to get to in today's show. We're going to tackle some thoughts on the Jalen Green contract extension discussion here right from the jump, some interesting hypotheticals to ponder. And we're going to be talking about this a lot this offseason, as well as some key dates to pay attention to this Rockets offseason, some things you'll want to make sure you're tuning in for, some things to ponder as we navigate the tumultuous roads of the offseason, as well as some NBA playoff thoughts, and specifically tying into the latest performance by one bearded fella who plays for the LA Clippers, and why the Rockets were justified, and I think still correct, in making the choice to pursue Fred VanVleet instead of James Harden. One more time, we're going to tackle that discussion with gusto. But let's start with the Jalen Green extension discussion, because this is going to be a thing that follows the Rockets around all offseason until we either get concrete news that it's happening or that it's not happening. Spoiler alert, as part of one of the important dates later on, but the Rockets have all the way up until the day before the 2024-2025 calendar NBA season starts. So roughly mid-October-ish. So they got plenty of time to decide if they want to extend Jalen Green and also subsequently Alperen Sengun. But ESPN's Bobby Marks, who does a fantastic job breaking down cap logistics and the financial situations for teams across the NBA landscape, did a segment talking about the Houston Rockets and about Jalen Green. So we're going to run that back really quick, and then we're going to share some additional thoughts on top of it.
We look at a full 3-year body of work. And I know you only have 1 year under Udoka. But here's a player that was close to being benched in the first half of the season, 41% from the field, 30% on threes. You have to take all 3 years into account here. I am not writing him a $225 million max extension check. 5 years, 160, that's fair. More than Devin Vassell, certainly fair. Better player, better, probably upside is higher, closer to an all-star here. And if that's not appeasable to Jalen Green in his camp, then we will see you in restricted free agency. And if, great, you have an all-star season, we'll be happy to write that check for $225.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of it here. I think from the jump, Bobby hits the nail on the head. You're not going to do a blank check rookie max extension for Jalen Green or, frankly, for Alperen Sengun at this point. He later on in the video went on to discuss Alperen Sengun's status as well as being rookie extension eligible. We're going to tackle that in another segment on another day, but at least let's keep the focus on Jalen Green here. 5 years, $225. Jalen has not proven himself worthy of that level of contract yet, right? There's the close, the play in really post All-Star break, right? That kind of second half of Jalen's season was incredibly encouraging. There was a lot of positives to look for. All around game, has improved through the roof. But like Bobby said, you have a full body of work to look at, a full 3 years to look at. So what number would the Rockets potentially be comfortable with? Now, here's where I urge a little bit of caution for the Rockets front office, for Rafael Stone and company, is in the past, when they were negotiating and discussing the Kevin Porter Jr. contract extension, they got a really safe, team-friendly deal, right? And on paper, it looked like the deal was incredible, but there were so many contingencies and so many things baked into that deal because internally they kind of knew that KPJ was potentially a bit of a flight risk, that maybe something would happen, that maybe he wouldn't live up to the contract that they did try to give him. And so the Rockets had tons of outs in that contract, but they were so determined to get a good deal, to quote unquote, to win the contract, to win the extension discussion with KPJ, when the safest fail-safe is to just let a player roll to restricted free agency, right? Because like Bobby already said, if Jalen Green goes to restricted free agency, which again, a quick refresher for this, the Rockets can extend qualifying offers to Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, effectively making them restricted free agents, which means that they don't give them full-blown 5-year rookie extensions. But what happens is next summer, the Rockets would have the full right to max any offer that another team rolls up and tries to give those guys. So if Alperen Sengun has another year where he plays incredible, or if Jalen Green has a year where he looks like a bona fide all-star and is worthy of a 5-year, $225 million max, the Rockets can pay him that contract. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And at that point, if you have a year that's that good, then the Rockets should feel comfortable and great about paying him that max contract. So I think right now, it feels like restricted free agency is probably the move, but has Jalen Green done enough? Would you be comfortable with a 5-year, $160 million extension right now for Jalen Green? Because here's the thing, and here's the calculus, is Jalen Green's cap hold, effectively, if he were to be extended a qualifying offer as the second overall pick from the 2021 NBA draft, it would be about $32-ish million. If you were to give him the 5-year 160, then you're looking at a first-year salary somewhere just a little bit above that range. But the difference, the cap savings that you get from giving Jalen Green the qualifying offer versus just go ahead and doing the extension is a little bit negligible, right? Whereas there's a huge difference, a much bigger delta between the money that you could save with Alperen Sengun later on that we'll discuss, if you wanted to delay on giving him a contract extension to maintain some of that cap flexibility. I think when you look at what Jalen Green has done this season, there's a lot of reason for optimism, but it just feels like the smartest move for the Houston Rockets is to wait and revisit the contract discussion next offseason to maintain and preserve that cap flexibility, to give Jalen another year under Ime Udoka to prove to be, hey, I can make this amount of money. Because there have been some inconsistencies in his game throughout his play for the first few years. And, would 5 years, 160 be a steal for the Rockets, right? Is that one of those things where you look back, and if you look back at the end of next season, you're thinking, oh man, now the Rockets have to pay him 5 years, 225. They could have saved a little bit of money if they had just locked him down for 5 years, 160. I'd rather the Rockets have the complete peace of mind that the 5 years, 225 was the right move, and that they have a full year where Jalen looks like an all-star for all 82 games rather than just the back half of a season, instead of hoping that you can get a good deal because of some of the inconsistencies in his game. And then turns out those inconsistencies are a little bit more of the truth or the reality of the situation, where then you might be locked into a guy 5 years, 160, who still has some holes in his game or still can't put together a full season that is similar to the run that he had over the second half of this past season. Those inconsistencies are a bit concerning, and that's why next year is going to be a really pivotal year for Jalen Green. But what would you do? Would you like to see the Houston Rockets give Jalen Green a contract extension this offseason? Do you think he's earned a contract extension? What number would you be comfortable with? Is 5 years, 160 a fair number for Jalen Green? Would you go lower? Would you go higher? Let me know in the YouTube comments. I'm very curious all your thoughts on how you would like to see the Rockets handle Jalen Green's contract negotiations. But coming up, I want to get into some very important key dates and information regarding this offseason as it pertains to the NBA and, of course, your Houston Rockets, as well as one more discussion surrounding the debate between James Harden, Fred VanVleet, which direction the Rockets could have gone, should have gone, shoulda, woulda, coulda, all that, as well as some additional thoughts on the NBA postseason thus far. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things a little further? Ever wonder what adventure could be waiting around the next corner? Well, our friends at Nissan have a lineup of SUVs with the capabilities to take your adventure to the next level. The 2024 Nissan Rogue is perfect for city drives and great escapes. Class exclusive Google built-in is your always updating assistant to call in for almost anything. Gone are the days of having to connect your phone. Google Assistant, Google Maps, and Google Play Store are built right into the 12.3-inch HD touchscreen at your fingertips. The 2024 Rogue is the perfect mid-size crossover for your next adventure. Or hey, maybe you want a little bit more space, right? The Nissan Pathfinder has room for up to 8, an expansive cargo capacity, and advanced available 4x4 capability with 284 horsepower and up to 6,000 pounds towing capacity. When adventure calls, the Pathfinder is right there to answer. So take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. Now, look, I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about Monopoly Go, but there's just so much good stuff going on with this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get your hands on. Unique stickers that you can trade with a friend to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting your friends and talking a little smack when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now, free on the Google Play Store or App Store. Again, it's free on the Google Play Store or the App Store. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Let's go ahead and dive into some of the important dates for the Houston Rockets to pay attention to this upcoming offseason, or I guess throughout this offseason, since it's already the offseason for the Houston Rockets. Regrettably, no postseason play this year, but hopefully that changes moving forward with this team. First date in the not-so-distant future is actually the NBA Draft Lottery, which is going to be Sunday, May 12th this year. And that Draft Lottery is actually going to be pretty important for the Rockets because they do own the Brooklyn Nets pick outright, which is currently sitting at the 9th best lottery odds on the board. And they do, however slim a chance it is, the Rockets do still own their own pick currently. However, it is owed to the OKC Thunder by way of the Russell Westbrook Chris Paul trade from a few years ago. And they do have a 7.5% chance for that pick to jump into what is effectively the top 4. And if it does jump into the top 4, then they would keep their own pick. So the Rockets could maybe walk away after the NBA Draft Lottery with some, a ton of excitement if their own pick somehow managed to skyrocket into the top 4, and then they also hold on to the Brooklyn Nets pick. Then they could have two top 10 picks to play around with, or lottery picks to play around with. So that date is going to be very, very important for the Rockets to kind of gauge what they can accomplish this offseason, because having two lottery picks to play with as far as, potential, trades and, making a run for maybe a star level player or something like that, or just drafting two young guys and stashing them could be really beneficial for this team. So NBA Draft Lottery, Sunday, May 12th. The NBA Draft Combine immediately after that. It's May 13th through 19th, always in Chicago. And then they have the NBA Draft in June, which is weird this year. They've decided to split it into 2 nights this year. So it'll be the first round Wednesday, June 26th, and then Thursday, June 27th will be the second round. So currently, the Rockets will be guaranteed to have at least one first-round draft pick, which is currently the Nets pick. They're going to have that one, regardless of what happens to their own pick. They could potentially have 2 picks, depending on if their pick, again, jumps up into the top 4. And they also will have the 46th pick in the draft, so a second-round pick to play around with as well. So the Rockets should have some activity on both nights of the draft, depending on what they decide to do, whether they draft those picks, whether they maybe make some trades. It's definitely going to be an interesting turn of events, having 2 nights to pay attention to for the NBA draft. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet. I'm curious. Give me your thoughts on how you feel about the NBA splitting the draft into 2 nights. I'm a little worried that, Obviously, the second round of the draft was always a little bit more of a buzzkill than the first round of the draft, but at the same time, maybe having a full night committed to the second round will be a little bit more fun. You'll have a little bit more green room action where you'll have some of the actual picks, more of the actual picks in-house to walk up on stage and, do some of the cool green room activities and hype, get hype on social media and that kind of stuff. I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. Then there's a bunch of deadlines near the end of the month of June as it pertains to NBA free agency that all have a pretty profound impact on what the Rockets do with some of the guys on this roster. So June 29th is the last day for decisions on players, player, team, and early termination options. So that applies to Jock, Landale, and Jae'Sean Tate for the Houston Rockets. And then Jeff Green actually doesn't have an option on his deal, but his contract becomes fully guaranteed on July 11th. So he is effectively a team option on his contract, but his decision is a little bit further down the line, so not the same deadline to decide as Jae'Sean Tate and Jock Landale, who are both team options. So Jock Landale with a $8 million option, and then Jae'Sean Tate with his $7.5 million option. And then June 29th, the last day for teams to make qualifying offers to players eligible for restricted free agency. So that's not something that's going to apply to the Rockets this offseason, but it is something that would apply to the Rockets next offseason to make those qualifying offers to Jalen Green, Alperen, Sengun, if they elect to let those guys, to not extend those guys this offseason. June 30th, negotiations with free agents can start. That starts at 5 p.m. Central Time, and then July 1st is the NBA moratorium period. So that's when restricted free agents can start signing their contracts, all that stuff. And July 6th, the moratorium ends, and that's when teams can officially start signing their players, and it's not just the reports, Shams and Woj and all the bombs and all that stuff. Not long after free agency, July 12th through 22nd is NBA Summer League. Depending on what the Houston Rockets do in the draft, they may have a young prospect or two that they send to Summer League, as well as, of course, a lot of the fringe guys, some undrafted candidates that they'll ultimately probably send down there. And if I had to wager, I would say that the Rockets are more than likely to also have Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore play in this year's Summer League, probably for 2 to 3 games a piece, I would imagine. Very similar to how Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason played in Summer League this past year. I think it shows a lot of leadership. I think it shows that even though those guys were top picks and that they had successful rookie seasons, that they're still willing to learn and grow. And especially if the Rockets do walk away with, a pick from the NBA draft lottery, a young player, maybe they jump up and they are able to take Alex Sarr, or maybe they get Reed Shepherd, or, they reach a little bit and draft Kel'el Ware. Whoever they get, they're going to want to be able to put that young player in a winning position for at least the first 2 or 3 games of Summer League before they start letting them kind of do their own thing. So I would imagine that Amen Thompson and Cam Whitmore will be participants again this year at NBA Summer League. And then that kind of rounds out the important True Blue off-season dates. And then, of course, we'll start hearing stuff. We'll start, Rockets training camp and everything will start up in September, media day around that time as well. They'll do the preseason and everything in October, and then the regular season tips off about mid-October every year. And it's worth noting, I already mentioned this in segment 1, but the final day for the Rockets to extend either of Jalen Green or Alperen would be the day before the start of the NBA regular season next October. So they've got all summer to deliberate and figure out whether or not it's worth extending one, if not either of those guys, or neither of them ultimately, which is currently kind of the boat that I'm sitting in. I think it just makes the most sense to postpone those contract discussions and just let both guys hit restricted free agency, kind of, make themselves prove it in year 4. All right. Those are the important dates to keep an eye on. Want to get into a little bit of Rockets discourse that I saw taking place the other day on social media. I think it's an interesting topic, and that is the whole James Harden versus Fred VanVleet dilemma. I know it's one of those woulda, coulda, shoulda, but didn't. But I want to drive one final nail into the coffin as to why I think the Rockets ultimately did make the right decision with Fred VanVleet, as well as some additional postseason playoff thoughts. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Want to make mom smile? Start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from the brands that she loves delivered the very same day right to her doorstep with DoorDash. Look, Mother's Day, it's a very important holiday, right? You got to show mom how much you love her. And sometimes you can't be there right when she wakes up in the morning, right first thing, right? You might have plans later in the day, or you might be taking her out to a nice dinner. But what better way to get her special day started than to show her how much you love her with a gift right there on her doorstep when she wakes up? Look, maybe she's a bit of a sweet tooth, right? Maybe she's a tech enthusiast, should be maybe a beauty connoisseur, or she's outdoorsy. It doesn't matter what she's into, what hobbies and interests she has. DoorDash can have you covered. You can make her smile with a fruit or flower bouquet, makeup, tech gear, workout wear, and so much more, all available on DoorDash. Get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off of your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, the reason for this discussion is James Harden has had a pretty strong series so far for the LA Clippers. That old bearded fella that we used to talk about a lot when he was with the Houston Rockets. And seemingly, a lot of Rockets fans, understandably so, are still incredibly attached to James Harden and want to see him experience the highest levels of success in the postseason, especially now that his success is no longer tied to the Houston Rockets' future, right? It was really hard when he was still a member of the Brooklyn Nets to want to cheer for James Harden because the Nets' success directly meant the picks would be less impactful for the Houston Rockets, the Nets picks that the Rockets own via the James Harden trade. But once James Harden found himself paired up with Joel Embiid in Philly, and now that he's with the LA Clippers, absolutely, yeah, go buck wild, James, right? If he can have a deep postseason run, if he can make it to the conference finals or the finals and have a legit shot for a championship, I'm all for it. Love some James Harden. He did amazing things for the Houston Rockets and for the city of Houston for the better part of a decade, right? We'll always have a lot of love for James Harden, despite how that relationship ultimately ended. Now, obviously, this past offseason, there was a legitimate chance and legitimate interest on both sides for the Rockets to have a reunion with James Harden. They had $60 million in cap space. Ultimately, they dedicated a lot of that to Fred VanVleet and the rest of it to guys like Dillon Brooks, Jock Landale, and Aaron Holiday. However, there's a lot of people that still believe that James Harden would have been the better move. And ultimately, we've talked about this a few different times, in passing or when it seems relevant here on this show. And I would just like to make the argument, as great as James Harden's playoff performances have been, the entire reason for Fred VanVleet being the ultimate pick and being the right pick, mind you, is, first off, he brings so many intangibles to the table. He is very much an extension of Ime Udoka and the mentality that Ime Udoka has as far as their similar leadership styles, right? They're no BS. They're straightforward. They tell it how it is. They don't sugarcoat things. That's exactly how Ime Udoka is. So having a veteran leader, having your floor general, having your point guard to come in and kind of clean things up, be kind of an extension of your personality on the court is, I think, one of the things that helped the Rockets adopt Ime's philosophies a lot quicker this season and helped implement them for the young guys. But then on top of that, just from the on-court production perspective, yes, I am not going to sit here and argue that Fred VanVleet is a better player than James Harden. He's not. Fred VanVleet's an incredible player. He's not better than James Harden, even right now, as you're worried about James Harden aging, whatever. In a vacuum, James Harden is the better player. But I still maintain that he was not the better player for this specific roster. And I say that because James Harden is very clearly a guy that has a very specific play style, right? Remember his quote? He is the system, right? Like, you put the ball in his hands and let him go to work. That's his whole mantra. That's how he plays. Now, yes, playing alongside Kawhi and PG, there has been more opportunity for James Harden to play off ball, if you will, but he's still the initiator. He's still the guy that runs a very heavy, steady diet of pick and roll, and that's how he's effective when he's on the floor. And then he likes to get into isolation, right? Get to his step back, drive downhill, create for others. I don't think we would have seen the individual growth in guys like Jalen Green, like Alperen, maybe still Alperen Sengun, right? Because James Harden would have spoon-fed Alperen Sengun probably even better than Fred VanVleet did, including post-ups and touches and everything that Alperen Sengun got this year through Fred VanVleet would have been, multiplied times like 1.5 or 2 if he had James Harden teeing him up. But aside from that, it just didn't fit with the scheme of the rest of the team, right? We saw as the season progressed, Ime used Fred VanVleet kind of like training wheels, right? The ball was constantly in Fred's hands very early on, and they experimented different ways to let Jalen Green tackle the lead ball handling responsibilities, whether it was subbing him out early and bringing him back with a bench unit, or then subbing Fred out early and letting Jalen spend the whole first quarter on the floor. We saw a variety of different ways in which Ime tried to deploy the different young guys. And I just don't think that he would have had that flexibility or that versatility with the roster had you been using James Harden. Because if James Harden is on the floor, the ball is going to be in his hands. Are you telling me that James Harden would have been okay with taking a backseat to Jalen Green while he struggled and tried to figure himself out for the first, first 2/3 of this season as a primary ball handler, as a lead ball handler? Probably not, right? The frustration probably would have set in pretty quickly, especially if this team was eyeing and really gunning for a play-in tournament spot to be relevant in the postseason. Plus, ultimately, James Harden really wanted to push for a championship, right? The Rockets were not in a position to make a push for a championship this season. Yes, they were hoping for some playoff aspirations. Yes, they wanted to make the play-in tournament. It ultimately didn't happen. But you look at how this season progressed and how all of these young guys grew, and the direct result of having Fred VanVleet as the guy on this roster, you also have to look at the defensive side of the ball. Yes, James Harden is not the albatross defensively that the national media tried to make him out to be years ago, but he has lost a little bit of a step, and he's not a plus defender the way that Fred VanVleet is, unless you get him isolated in the post, which somehow the league still hasn't caught on to that memo yet, and players still try to sometimes overpower James Harden, and that doesn't happen. But ultimately, I see James having this incredible playoff series, and I see a lot of Rockets fans kind of fawning over him and wondering, oh, what could have been, right? They should have picked him over Fred. And ultimately, I couldn't be more pleased and happy with the season that Fred VanVleet had, and as a direct result, the level of success that the Rockets' young core saw, to where the hardest line to toe in the NBA is to somehow have proper development of your young guys while also playing competitive high-level basketball. It's really tough to thread the needle between those two things. And yet the Rockets were capable of doing so, right? They played competitive high-level basketball. They played as a 500 basketball team this season. And every single one of the young core six got better as the season went along. I don't know if we would have seen the level of improvement that we saw in certain guys, pretty specifically Jalen Green. I don't think we would have seen Jalen Green take the leap that he did if he was having to play alongside James Harden. And I know some people might use the Tyrese Maxey example as but Tyrese Maxey flourished next to James Harden and all this. Yes, but Maxey did it in a very specific way, right? Jalen had the ball in his hands a lot during that stretch where he really took off in March. And I don't think you would have seen that same level or that same style of play for Jalen had James Harden been a part of the roster ultimately. So it's a lot of whataboutism and what the Rockets should have or could have done, and I just figured I'd revisit it here on the show as we're navigating the offseason, and it was a worthwhile conversation to have. It was something that I thought warranted a little bit of discussion, because I still feel very strongly that the Rockets made the right move by signing Fred VanVleet. I'm curious your thoughts, though. How do you feel about the Rockets, ultimately deciding Fred VanVleet over James Harden? Let me know in the YouTube comments. The only other thoughts that I want to chime in here, first off, from the postseason is Anthony Edwards is absolutely sensational. He's 100% going to be the next face of the NBA. You look at what he does and the level at which he's playing, how he's kind of the emotional heart of that Timberwolves team, as well as being their best player on the floor on a nightly basis, giving some very candid interviews post-game and having a lot of fun on the court as the Timberwolves swept the Phoenix Suns. And then with the Suns getting swept in the playoffs, man, the Suns are in a really rough spot. You're locked into Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal has a lot of money left on that contract with a no trade clause, and they have none of their own assets for the next 5 years. That's a really tough spot to be in if you're the Phoenix Suns, but a topic for another day. Should or could the Houston Rockets take a look at either of those two names, Devin Booker or Kevin Durant, this offseason as potential trade targets if the Phoenix Suns ultimately look to blow things up and move on? And hey, I'll tell you this much. The Nets own all the Suns picks. The Rockets own all the Nets picks. If the Rockets and Suns have a little bit of a discussion there, then we could maybe even factor in a 3-team deal in which the Suns get some of their picks back and the Nets get some of their picks, whatever. I'm getting tongue-tied at the end. Picks back. And there's some interesting angles there to discuss. So we're going to be sure to revisit that topic another day here at Locked On Rockets. But as always, I appreciate you for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe. Share your thoughts on everything that we tackled in today's episode. How would you feel about the Jalen Green contract extension? What number would you be comfortable with, or would you rather, like me, just see the Rockets let Jalen Green go to restricted free agency next offseason? How do you feel about the James Harden versus Fred VanVleet debate? All right, let me know in the comments. I read those every single day. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.